Welcome back, Global Health students. Thus far, we've learned a little bit about economic globalization and then demographic issues. All of these demographic issues we've discussed impact economic globalization and vice versa. For example, urbanization is in direct response to improved economic opportunities in cities, which arises because of economic globalization. The next major driver focuses on infectious diseases. Three issues can be associated with infectious diseases: emerging infectious diseases from animals, drug resistance from drug misuse, and pockets of disease viability from politics. And we'll explore each of these in the next few slides. First, let's look at emerging diseases, which came from our very close proximity to animals as we further develop into the wild. HIV/AIDS, SARS, which is severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, which came from infected bats and infected civet cats, Ebola, which came from infected bats, H5N1, West Nile virus, just to name a few emergent diseases that have transferred over from animals to people. As we encroach upon forests, we find ourselves facing traditional animal diseases. This map shows us the hot spots for emerging disease. I borrowed this from the New York Times, from their science section. And here we can identify the various emerging diseases that have come into the human population. You see Ebola in the middle of the bottom page, H1N1 virus on the left side of our screen, the West Nile virus, which is on the upper left-hand corner of the screen, as well as SARS, Nipah, and Hendra viruses, which all come from bats. And you can see that on the lower right-hand corner. The latest animal-human crossover disease is Lyme disease and the newer Anaplasma capra disease transmitted from ticks. This is an article that we found that shared this research. There were 6 new Florida cases of leprosy, all transmitted from people playing with armadillos. So be careful, beware, do not play with armadillos. This is an article that I found. We have 2 principal diseases becoming increasingly resistant globally. The first is MDR, multiple drug resistance TB or tuberculosis, which is caused by an inadequate or inappropriate treatment regime. And that's caused from basically patients forgetting to take their meds, or they feel better and they stop taking their meds, which is one I often hear. And another scary disease, XDR TB, which stands for extremely drug-resistant tuberculosis, which is frightening. And this is primarily concentrated in southern Africa and India. And interesting, this would make a very strong and powerful bioweapon. And then finally, tuberculosis. Let's explore tuberculosis. It's the second greatest killer worldwide due to a single infectious agent, second only to HIV/AIDS. In 2013, 9 million people got tuberculosis and 1.5 million died. For the past decade, the global tuberculosis incidence rate has declined, but only slowly, by about 1.65% annually. Meanwhile, the worst legacy of this disease has become multi-drug resistance. The number of new multi-drug resistant tuberculosis or MDR TB cases was 44,000 in 2013 with 150,000 deaths. Extensively drug-resistant TB, or XDR TB, is very, very, very scary. 40,000 people contract it annually, and 20,000 die. It is concentrated in South Africa and India, and many of the afflicted are also HIV positive. But it spreads to others, and this is primarily the problem. The article in the lower left-hand corner of your screen describes a woman with XDR tuberculosis who traveled from India to Chicago on a plane. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, had to track every single person she came into contact with on the plane and in the airport upon landing. Imagine that. Imagine that in the Chicago O'Hare Airport. Another example of an infectious disease is malaria. The issues include, like with tuberculosis, people never finish their course of meds. They feel better and they stop taking their medication. Mosquitoes are building up resistance to the current course of meds available. And we use DDT to kill all those mosquitoes, but we had to stop that because of major environmental concerns. DDT was very effective, but it's having major consequences to our environment. And the Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they're currently supporting tons of research around malaria, but we don't have a vaccine yet. 540,000 people died of malaria in 2013. And this map right here highlights where the malaria cases are found. The red color indicates the cases greater than 1 million. And these are the endemic areas. And as you can see, in Africa, they're all in the area that we focused on. Many, in each of our big public health issues, where we all need to focus our efforts. We are all at risk as laboratories create new synthetic diseases. Last year, there was an incident in Australia where a farmer created a new fowl virus, chicken fowl virus. The farmer was injecting his fowl trying to prevent disease. However, he ended up using 2 different vaccines in the same chicken without realizing it. These 2 vaccines combined together to form a brand new disease. This was discovered and stopped immediately. However, along these lines, there is concern that groups could create new viruses to be used as bioweapons. It's not that hard to do. There was just an article that I shared with you in your current events about a paper being published that shared how to change smallpox and make a new virus. Now let's take a look at the super H5N1, a new powerful threat. These 2 articles on the screen describe H5N1 research, which discovered that a slight modification to several amino acids would make H5N1 transmissible from human to human. This research community asked for, the research community that became aware of this asked for a halt to all further testing in this area. And most researchers complied accordingly and tried to repress the results, but the scientist in the Netherlands did publish his research and his findings. The intelligence community was very concerned about this, and their conclusion was that it is possible to successfully conduct this mutation, but it's not as easy as originally thought. To do this would require highly sophisticated lab equipment and years of research, but you know what? The potential is there. It's frightening. Biological weapons may be another infectious disease issue that we will discuss later in this presentation. This article highlighted here highlights 4 older men in their 70s from Georgia who wanted to add ricin, a poison made from castor beans, to the water supply of Georgia. However, they were all caught and apprehended. But can you imagine that? four old men in their 70s, late 60s and 70s, were trying to conduct a very biological plot, a very, very scary thing. The last of these disease issues are the pockets of disease viability, and in particular polio, and to a much lesser extent than a few years ago, guinea worm. I just sent out an article about guinea worm coming back a little bit. There were a couple more cases this year. It's something that we thought we could abolish, and we've been slowly working towards that. So let's take a look at polio. It mainly affects children under the age of 5. It can lead to irreversible paralysis, as we can see in some of these older photos below. But the cases have decreased by over 99%. And the picture on the left was from, I think, the 1950s with babies who had polio. Our current pockets of polio resistance include the areas that I've highlighted red on this map, the Afghanistan-Pakistan border area due to a conflict that has resulted in a few areas around in Karachi on the coast and also in Nigeria. These cases were actually contracted in the border areas, but they moved to Karachi. WHO, the World Health Organization, has reported that Nigeria is polio-free, but there may be a few cases due to the Boko Haram-controlled areas where no one can really get in there to see what's going on. Public health workers in Pakistan are focusing on polio eradication. And 26 of these public health workers have been killed in the past few years. Almost all of them were women. These are very, very brave people who realize that there is a good chance that they will be killed in their courageous fight to rid the world of polio. Now, and that was the article up on the upper right-hand corner and the upper left-hand corner. Now let's move to focus on guinea worm pockets, which are found primarily in Africa. This is a huge public health success around the world, especially for the Carter Center. They coordinated and implemented a massive and systematic effort to eradicate the world of guinea worm. People originally became infected with guinea worm by drinking water from ponds and other stagnant water containing tiny water fleas that carry the guinea worm larvae. The larvae are eaten by the water fleas that live in these water sources. Once drunk, the larvae are released from Cape Cods in the stomach and penetrate the digestive tract, passing into the body cavity. During the next 10 to 14 months, the female larvae grow into full-size adults. These adults are 60 to 100 centimeters, which are 2 to 3 feet long, and they're as wide as a cooked spaghetti noodle. Then, when the adult female worm is ready to come out of the human body, it creates a very painful blister on the skin anywhere in the body, but usually on the legs and feet. This blister causes a very painful burning feeling, and it bursts within 24 to 72 hours. And the human will immediately immerse that body part into the water to help relieve the pain. And when the body part goes into the water, it causes the guinea worm to come out of the wound and release a milky white liquid into the water that contains millions of immature larvae. This contaminates the water supply and starts the cycle over again. For several days, the female worm can release more larvae whenever it comes into contact with water. So each time there's pain on the body part, the person usually puts their body part into the water because that makes it feel better, and then more and more larvae are released into the water. Guinea worm is a major public health success. This slide highlights the Carter Center campaign strategy that has been effectively working to wipe out guinea worm around the world. This is from their website. So in summary, with infectious diseases, the 3 critical infectious disease drivers that we've discussed include the first, emergent diseases. those diseases primarily arising from our close proximity to animals. Number 2, drug resistance, arising from drug inappropriate use or misuse. And finally, the pockets of disease viability from war and political challenges. Infectious diseases are linked to demographic issues and economic globalization, as you can see. Ebola, for example, only spread so quickly because of improved transportation and mobility, which is also a demographic issue. Population expansion into forested areas exposes people to emergent infectious diseases. Now we're going to focus on our next driver, which is water.